springtimegardening.com, and I'm going to show you how to make fermented garlic-scapes. That's lacto-fermentation. So that's a way of creating pickles, right? You put the vegetable in some water with some salt, and you have some spices and stuff like that, and you leave it on the counter for a week, and the bacteria that are naturally existing in and on the vegetable itself go to work in that environment, and they create an acidic environment that is inhospitable to other kinds of organisms, and it also happens to just make everything taste great. So I'll put some resources, other websites you can read up on this technique. It's fundamentally different than the way I was taught to pickle things, where you're canning, right? You're putting everything in a mason jar, and it's in a vacuum, and it's a sterile environment. This is different. You want everything nice and clean, of course, and as sterile as possible. My jars have been in the dishwasher. That's one way, easy way of getting that going. You want all your utensils clean, all that sort of stuff, but you're not creating a sterile environment. You're creating an environment that favors a particular bacteria that's good for you, that creates an acidic environment that preserves the vegetable, that tastes good, right? So how do we get this going? I got the garlic-scapes here, nice big mess of them. And to prep these, I'm not going to do all of these, but just to give you an idea, I harvested these probably a week late. I wouldn't cut them because you want it to break where it's tender, right? If you break it, it'll break where it's tender. If you cut it, you really don't know where the tender stops. Now, if I'd done this a week ago, it wouldn't matter. They'd all be tender, but because I'm a little bit late, I mean, all these things, there's little different rules, right? If these were just pointing straight up or they just started to curl, you could cut it anywhere, it'd probably be tender. But when they've got a double curl like this, or almost a double curl, you don't know where the tender part stops, so you just sort of break it where it wants to break. Right, so I'm just going to do this whole bed here. I couldn't harvest them because I wasn't here, I was away. So they're not ideally tender, and the flower is larger than I would like. But there's not much you can do about that. I don't really find at this size, and I've pickled them like this before, the flower and about an inch back is a bit tough, so just get rid of that. I'm sure there's some way to use this. Maybe you grind it up and use it in a pesto or something like that, but there's no point. These scapes, I find they pack better into the jar if you cut them up into pieces that are, 3 or 4 inches long. I'm using one of these large half-gallon jars to can this. So that's what you got to do, right? Cut them all up like that. If you want to make that a little quicker, use a pair of scissors. These ones I actually got at a dollar store. And I always talk about keeping your knives sharp. You should also keep your scissors sharp. And it's the same thing as a knife. You can use a hone to sharpen scissors. It makes a big difference. You know, I wasn't taught to use scissors in food preparation, but I find for certain things like this, these sort of tedious things where you can't line these up in a row and cut them. You have to sort of do them one by one, which is a real pain. So I find with the scissors, it's just, I find it's faster. I just put the TV on, watch some excellent content on YouTube, and go to work on these. Luckily, through the magic of television, I've already done this, right? So when you cut these all up, you want to put them in a bath. You want to put them in water. Whoop, darn. You want to put them in some water so that they can be clean. Most importantly, and the reason you need to wash everything, is that you don't want any little bits of stuff floating up to the surface of the water and just staying right there at that meniscus level. I'll talk more about that a bit later. Anyway, you want to cover it with water and let it sit for, I don't know, 2 hours or overnight, right? I cut these up last night. So, there's lots of ways to do this using some sort of mason jar. You can just put a regular mason jar lid on there and burp it. That's like tightening and loosening it. And there's, a wide variety of approaches for this. This year I'm trying out this kit. this company Mason top didn't give me any money, but they gave me this kit for free. I think this costs around $100. I'm not exactly sure. I'll bring it a little closer here. Vanna White moment here. This kit basically, you know, I do a lot of fermenting, and I really think this is, for me, probably enough. It comes with some of these ring thingies that go on the top of the jar. These are valves that go like here. And it's got some of these weights that you put, they fit inside a wide mouth jar. You have to have these half-gallon wide mouth jars. It holds 1,600 milliliters, almost a little bit more than that actually. Or to put it in another terminology, 56 ounce, right? When you're fermenting any sort of vegetable, it's what they call an anaerobic environment. What you want is an anaerobic environment, and that is to say, you want an environment that doesn't have oxygen. So all of the plant matter has to be submersed, and a lot of plant matter likes to float. So you fill everything in here, and then you put one of these things on top, and that'll push everything down below the water level, and that just ensures that everything's working properly. It also prevents this white scum that can form on the top. Not the end of the world if you get that white scum. I've gotten it on various batches of pickles and things like that I've made. I mean, I ran into my own pickles a few months ago. I made these ones from store-bought pickles. When I made this, it had some of that white stuff on top, and I just scraped it off, threw it out, put it in the fridge. That stuff only really lives at room temperature. And once it goes into the fridge, you get rid of that white stuff, the comb or whatever it's called, put it in your fridge, put it in a cold environment, it doesn't form, right? And you know, it really, when you first open the jar and you've got that stuff on there, it's got a sort of a yeasty smell, is the best way I can put it. But I mean, these are fine. That stuff's been removed and there's no yeasty smell now. Once you make your pickles, they keep quite a while. This kit also comes with one of these masher thingies. So if you're trying to get your stuff down, press it a little bit. It's really handy if you're making. Whoa, it's really handy if you're making sauerkraut. Right? This is sauerkraut I made a few months ago. Still going, still good, still fine. When you're making sauerkraut, you want to push everything down and mash it all down a little bit. So that's a handy tool for that. You can get by without it, but it's just a nice thing to have. Anyway, so we got everything here. I've got a bowl here. What I'm going to do is take one of these. Here's the one I used before, so I might as well use it again. These three things that are going to be in contact with the jar. Just going to stick them in here. And put some boiling water on top of them, just to sort of, I mean, these have gone through the dishwasher, but why not be a little, you know, extra, just an extra measure. I'm going to use this spoon. Again, we're not really creating a sterile environment, but it's good to have everything as clean as possible, just to keep, you know, foreign bodies out. We set that aside. Now the other thing we need to add to this is two things. You need to have something like a grape leaf. Just from, if you have grapes in your garden, just take a few leaves off the plant. I would say about 3, about hand size. It's good for a jar this size. So you need some grape leaves. Why do you add these? When you add these, they, I'm not exactly sure why this works. I'm sure I could look it up. It wouldn't be that difficult. When you have grape leaves in with your pickles, it keeps them from going soft, keeps them crunchy. So if you like things crunchy, which I'm guessing you do, you need to have grape leaves. I've also read, but not tried, that you can use oak leaves, but only the oak leaves that have the round edges, not the ones with pointy edges. I've just read that. You can also use bay leaves. So anyway, I've got grape leaves, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to remove the stem bit. I don't know if that matters or not, but that's what I've always done, and it seems to work fine, so why break the tradition? I'm going to put that in the water too. You don't want any little flecks of stuff or bits of stuff coming to the surface. Now I got some dill here. I use the scissors to process this. I'd say you want at least 3 good stalks. I love dill and pickles, so now I can go overboard. Anyway, throw the dill in there. You don't need the stem. You can throw the stems in. I mean, they have some flavor, right? It's up to you. Also, especially when you're doing dill pickles, like cucumbers, you want to have the seed heads in there as well. They add flavor. I'm not exactly sure what it's like if you don't use them. But I always try to put them in, and from everything I've read, they benefit the pickles. And you got them anyway, so why not use them, right? That one doesn't look like much. Let's get rid of that. This one looks pretty good. These are really starting to bolt. Again, this would have been an ideal thing to do a couple weeks ago. But oh well, you do things when you can. It's a good motto for gardening. You know, don't get fazed by things. Just shrug it off and move on. All right, so we got all the stuff. So what I'm going to do is just take all this stuff and just give it a good washing and put it in the colander and rinse it off. So stay tuned, I'll be right back. Okay, so we got this all washed. One thing I forgot to do is you want to take a tablespoon and you want to put some boiling water in with 2 tablespoons of coarse pickling salt. This is something you can buy here, Windsor pickling salt. I'm not getting any. Just for people that live in this area, this is what I use. This is basically the cheapest salt you can buy. Windsor coarse pickling salt. One of these big boxes costs, I think, $2.99. I use this for everything. Anyway, if anyone knows an executive at Windsor pickling salt, I'd be happy to endorse their products. All right, so I'm not being too precise here. I'm putting 2 generous tablespoonfuls into this jar. This isn't. I'm going to be putting everything in this jar eventually, but I'm just using this as a measure. I find if you fill this with water and you fill this with whatever vegetable you're pickling, chances are you're going to have enough of the salt water to do what you need to do. Okay, so while we're doing stuff, you fill this up so that the salt can dissolve into the water, right? Give that a little stir. Put that aside. Get this stuff out of the way too. All right. Put that out of the way. Now, one thing you should do before you begin this whole process, and I did this off camera, is stuff everything in the jar and see if it fits, see if you have enough, right? You've got to stuff everything in the jar, see if it fits. You know, that way you're not like halfway through the process and you got to process more stuff. So I know I got enough stuff to fill this jar. So the next step is just to fill the jar, right? So I'm going to I put all of these sort of flavor things in the bottom. And the reason I do that is I don't want any little bits of stuff. If you have anything above the surface of the water, it will create problems for you. Also wash your hands. it won't ruin anything, I don't think, but it just causes this white stuff that I mentioned before to form in there, and I mean, you just want to avoid it. It's just worth avoiding it if you can. It doesn't add, that white stuff doesn't add anything to the flavor, and it's just something you have to, if you get it, you can deal with it. You can still eat the pickles. You know, if I ever have a batch with that white stuff, I'll show you, because someone who's new to this is like, oh my god, the whole thing's compromised, I gotta throw it out. No, you don't. Right. Anyway, now I'm gonna put these leaves in. Don't worry, the stuff that's in these that imparts the flavor into the vegetable, it'll all work itself out in the solution, right? You're gonna have these in here a long time. You gotta set them on the counter for a week, and then you're probably gonna leave them in your fridge for another week before you even eat them. Yeah, it's not worth, you know, all the flavors are gonna find their way around, no problem. Now it's just a process of stuffing this all in here. I'm gonna fast forward this part. Here we go. So I poured the water in and it's still about 2 inches below the surface. So if you're in that situation, just add some more boiling water. You've got enough salt in there for everything to happen, right? And don't worry about the boiling water killing the organisms. There should be enough still alive in there to begin the reaction, right? As soon as this water gets in here, it sort of cools down immediately because the vegetables are at room temperature. You could mix it. You could mix some of the water with cold water. I find when you do that, there's a greater chance of getting that white stuff growing in there. It's just my experience. But another thing you can do, which I find looks great, is you get some of your brine from a previous batch of pickles that worked out good. This is just like if you were going to make a yogurt or a sourdough or something like that. And this, we call this the mother, right? So you top it up with some of the pre-existing stuff. I'm not going to add this right now because this is still quite hot and I don't want to kill everything in here, right? Because that'll intermingle very quickly. So I'm going to wait 5 minutes and then I'm going to pour this in. I'll put this little lid on here just in the meantime. Right? And I'm just going to give it about 5 minutes for the temperature of the vegetable and the hot water to balance each other out. That should happen in about 5 minutes. Be right back. While it's cooling off, I'll just talk one more second about this kit from Mason Tops. So the website is masontops.com. And if you go there and buy anything, as far as I understand it, you don't have to buy the skip. They have lots of different things there. Jar lids and stuff like that. You get a 10% discount and you just use the code Maritime, all uppercase, 10, the number 10, Maritime 10. Use that coupon code and you get a 10% discount. Okay, I think that's had enough time to cool down. It doesn't feel, a good way to test it is to just put your hands on the jar. And if it's too hot for you to keep your hands on the jar, it's probably too hot for the bacteria. And if you can keep your hands on there, it's probably okay because you're alive, right? If it was too hot for you, it's probably not too hot for a lot of other living things. So I'd say it's probably, slightly above body temperature, but anyway, that's fine. Now what we have to do, and what is this thing? This is a valve, right? So it's got this little sort of nipple at the end and there's a tiny hole in here. And it lets air out, but doesn't let air in. So when this thing's working away, after a day or so, it'll happen a lot quicker with me because I've got this, I've already got some of the mother to add to it, so it'll happen very quickly with me. Once you add this and those little organisms start to go to work on the vegetable, gases start being created and it needs to bubble off. So this allows, if you put a lid on this, like a mason jar lid, and put it on tight, it'll blow the jar up. I'm not actually sure what will happen, but you need to let that air out. Okay? So, what am I going to do here? I'm going to add this stuff here. I've just been sitting in my fridge for months. There's no mold, no nothing. It just smells like vinegar. I'm going to add this, top it up with this stuff. I put too much in there. I'll put this thing in. Yeah, of course I put too much in there. Of course I did. Try to push that down a little bit. Make a bit of a mess. Yeah, I got a bit too much stuff in there. Let's just bail this thing out a little bit. I would say you want to leave about a ½ inch of airspace at the top. But you want everything in there submerged. That's good. Now we can just put this thing on. Put this thing on. Snug it up. And the final thing. I'm not exactly sure why this is the case, but from everything I've read, you need to do this. These are the microorganism, the bacteria that does all the work in here, doesn't like light. So you can put it in a cupboard. If I put it in a cupboard, I'm going to forget about it. So I like to use a paper bag, right? Put a paper bag over it. And then what I'll usually do is mark the date down. So today it's what is it? It's the 13th. All right, July 13th. So that way I know when it was, when it was put up. I just slide this over to the corner of my counter, and next Friday and I say 7 days. Some people only do it for 4 days. Some people like to do it for longer. The longer you leave it, the stronger the intensity of the flavor gets. So from everything I've read, in my experience, about 7 days seems to be right. When I do pickled things, I like the way they taste after 7 days. Adjust to your taste. So that's all you gotta do. That's how you do lacto-fermentation. Once you get good at this, it's actually a lot faster than canning. Now, it takes a whole week, but in terms of the work, right? I don't have a big thing full of water that I have to put the jars in and mess around with this, that, and the other thing. For those of you with experience canning, it's a fairly involved production. Now, if you can enlist your entire family into it, I'm sure you can get some efficiencies in. But if you're just one person doing it yourself, I find I can do a batch of pickles in a jar like this in about 5 minutes, right? And you just set it off in the corner, and after a week you stick it in the fridge or stick it in your cold room, your root cellar. After it's done, after a week, and I'll follow up on this video, I'll show you. It can't be stored in a cupboard, right? It has to go somewhere cool. Somewhere refrigerator temperature, maybe 8 degrees Celsius. Americans have to do things in Celsius. That's my reference. I'm sure it's easy enough to Google what 8 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit. Anyway, I wouldn't go much warmer than that, but I think 8's okay. Because last year I ran out of room in my fridge for all the stuff. I did a video on this, maybe I'll put it below. But I ended up, I had no place to put all my canned goods, all my lacto-fermented goods. And my wife said, look, there's no more room in the fridge, dude, you gotta figure something out. So I dug a hole in the backyard and buried everything there. Sort of like a poor man's root cellar. And it worked out great. I did a video where I dug them up and ate one right there in the woods. Dug a hole in the woods, actually, behind my house. Anyway, that's the general basics for lacto-fermenting if you're doing a garlic-scape. Of course, if you were doing a pickle, you'd want to add some garlic cloves to it, or other spices, depending on your own taste. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gave you one more idea. I've got I've got over 100 garlic in my garden, and I've probably got enough garlic-scapes to make 2 of these, which is a fair amount. And that's all I really. I'm the only person in my family that eats these. I'm a big lover of different pickled things. So that's certainly enough for me to last a year. All right. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope it gave you some ideas for ways to store vegetables that you grow in your garden. A lot of us have that experience where we get too much too fast. We don't know what to do with it. This is a great way to store your veg. Not only does it keep well, and it changes the flavor and makes it something different, but the bacteria that are doing all the work in here, they're actually good for you. They're probiotic, like yogurt in a sense. So you get that benefit as well. Okay, let's have a look at this thing. This is a batch I did 2 days later. Still working. This is a batch I did on July 13th, and it is now July 20th, so it's been a week. So I got the paper on here so that it's not exposed to the light. And for the last 3 days, anytime I've walked by this corner of the kitchen, I can smell garlic. So it's definitely off-gassing. So let's have a look underneath the hood here. I can zoom this up a little bit. What I'm hoping we don't have is a sort of white scum that sometimes appears. It's not a big deal, it's just you hope you don't have it. Right, this off here. Let's see. All right, so I got it. That's what they call calm or comb or whatever. I'll put the name on the screen here so you can see the exact spelling. If you do any reading, it's not a big deal. And here's what I do to deal with it. You just sort of scoop it off. That's all you got to do. It's just this, I guess, like a fungus that if when you pour everything into the bottle, there's little tiny particles of things floating around, this stuff will form, and I had that. I honestly think if I did this again, it's been a year since I did this. Maybe you forget things, but I think the best way to prepare the garlic-scapes is to pour boiling water over them and then drain that water, and then add the water to the bottle. You just give them a rinse in boiling water once, because and of course I gotta wait an entire year to try this again. That's the problem with all this stuff. I didn't write anything down last year. As soon as I poured the water in, I realized the mistake I made. As soon as you pour the water in, there's these little tiny, the actual garlic has these little tiny skins, I guess, on it. And when you pour the water, all these little tiny bits of skin sort of rise to the top and create this little bit of particles on the top. And that's all that's needed, right? Because the lacto-fermentation is happening in an anaerobic environment, which is what you want. But anything that's floating right on the surface, there's a bit of oxygen, right? This little space here, there's some air. And so other things can form here. So below that surface, where everything's basically water, everything's okay. But above that, around those little tiny flecks there, there's a little piece right there, little tiny, I don't know if you can see that, little flecks of dill, and little tiny pieces of things, carbon material. Anyway, we've got all that stuff out. So now I can pop out the weight, get that thing out. Oh, come on. Maybe some way to do that. There we go. There's the weight. A couple more pieces of that white stuff in there. And all that calm and comb or whatever is at the top. There's a little bit of boiling water at the top. Boil that kettle. Seeing everything, nothing floats now because it's all waterlogged or saturated, however you want to put that. Alright, so that's good. That's all you got to do. So now all I got to do is put a lid on this and get it in the fridge, and it'll stop working after a day or two. So for putting this stuff down, I prefer these plastic lids. I find that when you've got this sort of thing, and this is still, actually when I added that little bit of hot water, this started working again. Let me zoom in here and show you. See that fizzing? I just added a tiny bit of heat and it started bubbling away. Right? That's there's still bacteria in there and it's still working away on this. When you initially get the mixture together, it takes a couple days for that to start happening. And then after about 2 days, it really starts to work away and it starts to create a lot of gas. And then it reaches a peak after about 4 or 5 days, and then after that it starts to gradually settle down. So I mean, it's still working, it's still off gassing. But as soon as and it's actually, it wasn't bubbling like this before I put that hot water in. So the hot water actually warmed this up and you know, got things going a little bit. So I'm going to put it in the fridge, and that'll calm things back down. So I'm going to put the lid on here, sterilized lid. But tomorrow morning I'll loosen this off and I'll tighten it up again, just in case there's any gas buildup in here, because it's still working. But it's going to slow down a lot as it cools. But remember, this is not a sterile environment. It's the opposite, right? You're growing something in here, but you're growing something in here that doesn't let anything else in. So, you know, do your research and learn about this on your own. Don't come and sue me if anything goes wrong with yours. If you make any sort of pickle and it tastes horrible, throw it away. It should taste like the thing you pickled, only kind of salty and kind of acidic. That's the flavor. It should be crunchy, tasty, salty, and acidic, and like the thing you pickled. If it's not all those things, throw it out, right? Because if it doesn't taste good, throw it out. But also, if it doesn't taste, if it's not still crunchy, if it's not acidic, it's not salty, and it doesn't taste like the thing you pickled down, something's probably gone wrong. Don't take your chances, just throw it out. Don't eat it if it's no good. And if it turns out you don't like pickled garlic-scapes, but they still taste like garlic-scapes, just salty and acidic, you can just cut them up and use them in your cooking. They're perfectly fine. Right, I pickled something during the winter. You know, I use this technique to preserve all kinds of things. So I use this technique to preserve broccoli stems. You know, my kids like the flowers, but they don't like the stems. You get all these stems. You just put them in a jar like this and leave them on the counter for a week with salt, and you get that nice sort of pickled flavor. And I'm not crazy about them on their own, but I just cut them up and throw them in a stir fry, and everybody thinks it's just broccoli, right? And you get the added probiotics that go along with part and parcel of lacto-fermentation. Anyway, that's just one example of how easy lacto-fermentation is. And even if you get that white stuff on the top, it's not the end of the world. If you want to avoid having that white stuff, use these things. This wasn't the best example of that, but it's not the fault of this valve. It's because I had a bunch of rubbish floating around the top on the surface, right? And that happens sometimes, but it's not the end of the world. You can still use the pickles. Just sort of get it out of there. If you want to be really careful, empty the whole thing out and run the liquid through a strainer and repack it into a sterilized jar, and then it'll be fine. I've done that before, and you can do that. These are going straight into my fridge, and I'm going to use them right. I've got no pickles right now, right? It's July. Everything is used up, so I'm going to use these for now. You put these in the fridge and wait a week, right? And you can eat. I could eat these tomorrow if I wanted, but they seem to be. They're just better if you wait another week, right? You leave them on the counter for a week, and then you put them in the fridge for a week, and then they're cold. And if you get too many of these and you start running out of space in your fridge, you need a cold room or a root cellar, or barring having neither of those two options, or a second fridge. Do like I did last summer. Just dig a hole in the ground and bury everything, because that works fine. You can see that video. Maybe I'll put that link to that video below. Worked great for me. I put all kinds of pickles underground, sort of like a poor man's root cellar, and it worked fine. So I hope that gave you some good ideas. It's a little bit late for some of you with your garlic-scapes. If my garlic-scapes are all come and gone, I'm sure yours have too. But anyway, I had to get that video done, and that's something to put in your memory for next year when you've got your garlic-scapes coming in, or for those of you that are even further north than me, where it's colder. If yours are coming in, this is one way to preserve all of that. You can also use them to make pesto, and use them in all kinds of different cooking as well. But this is, you know, the two main ways to preserve them, as far as I know, it is to make a pickle or make a pesto. All right, so I hope you found that useful. I hope you gave you some good ideas, and if so, please like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden.